Okay, so you want to buy a data center. The buildings behind the AI boom. No windows. Almost no employees. Just racks of humming machines in the dark. And tenants who happen to be the richest companies in human history. Here's the strange part. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Oracle are pouring somewhere between $600 and $700 billion into these buildings in 2026 alone. The largest infrastructure spend ever recorded. And yet, the companies writing those checks might not be the ones getting rich. Because in this gold rush, the miners don't own the mine doesn't own the land, and every single player, every one, is lining up to pay the same 3 landlords. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly who those 3 landlords are, who collects a cut of every AI query on Earth, whether the AI boom succeeds or collapses, and why one of them is quietly charging you, every month, on a bill you already pay. Let's go shopping. Data centers come in 3 sizes, and just like everything else in this series, they're 3 completely different businesses. The entry level is a co-location facility, a warehouse of server racks you rent out by the cage to companies that need somewhere to put their computers. Tens of millions of dollars. Boring, profitable. Not what the AI boom is made of. The middle tier is a hyperscale data center. This is the real product. A single windowless building drawing as much power as a small city. Construction cost runs roughly $10 to $12 million per megawatt of capacity. So a 100 megawatt facility is a $1 billion building before a single server moves in. And then there's the top tier, and this is where the numbers stop sounding like real estate and start sounding like geography. Meta's Hyperion campus in Louisiana covers 3,650 acres. That's 4 times the size of Central Park. One campus. Now here's your first surprise as a buyer. The building, the concrete, the cooling, the security, is the cheap part. Roughly half the cost of an AI data center isn't the data center at all. It's the chips inside it. And hold that thought, because those chips are where this entire story is heading. So say you've done it. You've spent your billion. You own 100 megawatts of gleaming, empty, state-of-the-art data center. Congratulations. Now here's the bill nobody warned you about. Your building is worthless without electricity. Industrial quantities of it, delivered every second of every day, forever. And in America's primary data center markets, the waiting list just to connect a new facility to the power grid now runs more than 4 years. 4 years. Your billion-dollar building can sit there, finished, silent, earning nothing, while it waits in line for a plug socket. And while you wait, the clock is eating you alive, because the chips inside your building don't age like real estate. They age like fruit. The industry depreciates AI hardware in roughly 3 to 5 years, and every new generation makes the old racks less rentable. A data center isn't a building that holds value. It's a building that holds a melting asset. In 2025, utilities across America received connection requests for at least 700 gigawatts of new data center power. That is more electricity than the entire United States consumed in 2023. Most of those projects will never be built, but every one of them is fighting you for the same sockets. Power is the moat, and that means whoever already has the power holds the keys to the whole boom, which brings us to the part that breaks people's brains. Reveal 1. The tech giants don't actually own many of these buildings. You'd assume Microsoft and Amazon own their data centers the way Marriott owns hotels. But here's the thing. Marriott doesn't own hotels. And increasingly, neither do the hyperscalers. Industry analysts tracking 2026 spending report a deliberate shift. The giants are leasing more and more of their data centers instead of building them, because leasing keeps hundreds of billions in construction risk off their books. So if the richest companies on Earth are renting, who's the landlord? Reveal 2. Meet the landlord. In 2021, the private equity giant Blackstone bought a data center company called QTS for about $10 billion. Almost nobody noticed. Since then, QTS's leased capacity has grown 14 times over, and Blackstone has plowed more than $150 billion into data center assets. assembling what may be the most quietly powerful real estate empire of the decade. And look at how they run it, because this is beautiful. QTS does not build speculatively, not one building. A data center only rises after a tenant, an investment-grade tech giant, has already signed a lease. And not a normal lease, 15 to 20 years. With rent increases written into the contract, escalating automatically, every single year. Read that again. The landlord takes almost no risk, and the richest companies in history sign 2 decades of rising rent before the concrete is even poured. The tenants are betting the AI boom pays off. The landlord gets paid either way. Reveal 3. And now, the toll booth. Remember those chips, half the cost of every facility? Roughly 90% of the money spent on AI accelerator chips flows to one company, NVIDIA. In its last fiscal year, NVIDIA's revenue hit $215.9 billion, up 65% in a single year, and nearly all of it came from data centers. But the revenue isn't the shocking part, the margin is. NVIDIA's gross margin is running at 75%. Analysts estimate its flagship AI chips cost around $3,000 to produce and sell for over $30,000. That is not a hardware business. That is a toll booth on the only road into the AI era. And every company you've ever heard of is idling in the queue with its wallet open. The result? NVIDIA is now the most valuable company on the planet. It doesn't build AI. It doesn't run data centers. It sells the shovels, and it gets paid before anyone finds gold. Reveal 4. And the third landlord? Check your mailbox. Because the electricity feeding this boom has to come from somewhere, and here's who's actually paying for the grid to be rebuilt around it. Average residential electricity prices in America have risen 42% in 5 years. Around Washington, D.C., next door to the largest data center cluster on Earth, they've nearly doubled. In Virginia, data centers already consume roughly 40% of the entire state's electricity. A retiree in Manassas, Virginia, opened his January bill, $281, up from around $100 the month before. A couple in central Ohio watched their rate climb 60% as 130 data centers rose around them. And here's the detail that should make you angry. Over the same period that household rates exploded, industrial electricity prices, the rates the data centers themselves negotiate, actually fell. The companies driving the demand secured the discounts. The households absorbing the consequences got the increases. You are subsidizing the AI boom. It's just itemized as your power bill. Now, before you conclude this machine is unstoppable, open the disaster file. Because the cracks are already on record. In Virginia, QTS spent years fighting for a project called Digital Gateway, 2,100 acres, planned to be the largest data center campus in the world, valued in the tens of billions. In 2026, after a brutal legal war with local residents, they walked away. The world's biggest data center is now the world's biggest empty field. It's not alone. In a single year, local opposition blocked or delayed at least 16 data center projects worth a combined $64 billion. Maine's legislature approved a statewide moratorium on new construction. The backlash is no longer a protest, it's policy. And then there's the debt. The hyperscalers are now spending 45 to 57% of their entire revenue on capital expenditure, ratios you see at utility companies, not software companies. And Wall Street projects the tech sector may need to issue $1.5 trillion in new debt to keep the build-out going. All of it resting on one question, first posed by a Sequoia Capital analyst. For this spending to make sense, the AI industry needs to generate roughly $600 billion a year in real revenue. Nobody can show you where that revenue currently is. Maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. But notice something about everyone we've met in this video. The landlords don't need it to come. Because here's the machine, fully assembled, follow the money up the chain. The AI companies, the famous ones, the chatbots, the labs, mostly don't own data centers. They rent computing power from the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers, increasingly, don't own the buildings. They lease them from Blackstone, and landlords like it, on 20-year contracts with automatic rent hikes. Everyone in the chain buys chips from NVIDIA at 75% margins, and the power bill for the whole pyramid is quietly socialized onto 40 million household electric bills. It's renters, renting from renters, renting from renters. And at the bottom of the stack sit three parties who collect no matter what happens above them: the chip maker, the landlord, and the meter. One more thing, and this is the tell. In 2026, Blackstone took part of its data center empire public. Retail investors were sold a piece of the AI boom. But look inside the deal. The stabilized buildings, the safe, pre-leased, 6% yield layer, that's what got sold to the public. The development layer, the 15% plus returns, stayed in Blackstone's private funds. When the people who own the machine start selling you tickets to it, notice which seats they keep. So let's close the ledger. Two futures. Scenario 1. AI delivers. The $600 billion in revenue shows up. The boom becomes the new economy. The hyperscalers finally earn a return on their trillion. Years from now, after depreciation. NVIDIA keeps its toll booth. Blackstone's rents escalate on schedule. Everyone wins, the landlords most of all. Scenario 2. AI disappoints. The revenue never closes the gap, CapEx gets slashed, and the most expensive buildings on Earth start emptying. But the leases? 15 to 20 years, signed by investment-grade giants. The rent gets paid anyway. The chips? Already sold. Cash collected years ago. Your electric bill? The grid upgrades are built. The rate hikes don't get refunded. Run both futures side by side, and you get the only sentence in this story that matters. Heads, the landlords win. Tails, the landlords get paid anyway. 170 years ago, men tore across a continent to dig for gold, and the fortunes went to the ones selling picks, renting land, and charging for passage. Everyone knows that story. Everyone swears they'd have been the ones selling shovels. Well, it's happening again, right now, at a scale 1,000 times larger, and almost everyone is once again lining up to dig. The chips get sold either way. The rent gets paid either way. The meter runs either way. The AI boom already has its winners. They just don't make AI. And that raises a darker question, the one Wall Street whispers and nobody says out loud. If the tenants ever stop paying, who's left holding $1 trillion of windowless buildings? That story, the crash scenario, is the next video. Subscribe, because when it happens, you'll want to already know who was holding the bag.